associated with these things. And so thanks to those folks, and thanks also, of course, to all the presenters who gave of their time generously, gave of their knowledge generously, to open up our minds and our hearts to this human agave symbiosis over the centuries, from Wendy Hodgson all the way to this session with Roberto Contreras. All of these people are actors in recounting, in continuing to live the symbiosis. So today's session is called Agave Is the Future. So we've looked at the past, we've looked at the present, and we've been talking about the future last night. And we're going to tonight, and maybe all across the sessions, we've at least been intimating some points about how agave might figure in the future of sort of biocultural landscapes between humans and in agaves and other species. So once again, thanks to everybody. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks to all of you who have attended these sessions as well. Thanks for your support. Really appreciate it. With that, let me just go ahead and introduce Roberto. We're joined tonight by Roberto Contreras Jr., who is a 5th generation maestro vinatero, or master distiller, from the Rio Sonora region, which is not so far from here. It's about 5 hours, I would say, from my door to yours, Roberto. So it's not so far. And I think it's kind of nice to end all of these sessions with a close look at a region of Sonora, which is almost neighboring to Tucson. I think that's a nice way to go. My first introduction to Bacanora, which is Sonora's signature mezcal, was through the Contreras family's initial brand, at least the initial brand that was available in the United States, which is Cielo Rojo. And I learned through that experience that, having tasted Bacanoras from various parts of the country, it became clear to me that Bacanora, although it's made from one of the most common species of agave that makes mezcal, which is Agave angustifolia, Bacanora really has its own particular profile. It has its own Sonoran taste. It has its own niche in kind of the palette of mezcal flavors. It's the taste of the northern Sierra Madre in my mind. And so Bacanora is really quite distinct, and we'll talk about that a little bit more tonight. We've talked about that over the course of various sessions, but we'll get more into that this evening. Bacanora, or rather the Contreras family these days, represents or produces a brand called Rancho Tepúa, which is one of the most important representations of Bacanora, if not the most important representation of that subcategory of the category mezcal in the United States. Recently, they have branched out beyond Bacanora proper to make Lechuguilla, which is another type of mezcal, as well as Palmilla, which is the Sonoran version of Sotol. And maybe we'll get into that, your decision-making process that led you to make these different expressions beyond Bacanora. That'll be a kind of an interesting detail of the conversation, perhaps. And finally, the Contreras family has been very active in discussions around the future of Bacanora, around the future of mezcal in Sonora. In particular around questions about the denomination of origin, its geography, who gets to be represented as a producer in the denomination of origin. What are the rules of production? What agave species can you use? All of those things that are gathering around, well, of course, including sustainability. How do we need to cultivate agaves in order to provide a future for that industry? The Contrerases have been, as prominent Bacanora makers, important in those discussions, and we will also get to that this evening. I've been privileged to visit Rancho Tepúa several times. I've enjoyed the hospitality of the Contreras family. They're all really good cooks, by the way, including you, Roberto, very good cook. I've gotten to know a little bit about the cattle economy in Sonora through your example. The ranch itself, I think, is one of the most beautiful places in the state of Sonora. So I've had a chance, I think, to become friends of your family, which has been a great privilege for me. And I guess that'll do it. It's a pleasure to welcome you, Roberto. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. And I will turn it over to you in just a second. And maybe you can go ahead and start sharing your screen now while I have something to say about how the tasting is going to go real quick. We're going to taste 3 expressions tonight. We're going to begin with Rancho Tepúa Bacanora, because I think Roberto is going to begin by discussing a little bit of the production process on the ranch. So it'll be nice to put those images and that discussion against the tasting while we taste the spirit. We're also going to taste one of the Respiral expressions. Those of you who attended the session last night will remember the discussion by Alex White. He discussed his project and the ethos of that project. It seemed fitting to me to taste one of the products that he represents. So we're going to taste his Pechuga de Café. And when we get to it, I'll describe a little bit of what that means, Pechuga de Café. And then third, we've chosen a mezcal expression from Santa Catarina Minas, Real Mineros Espadín, which is distilled in clay pots, in part because as we talk about the future of agave and the future of mezcal, as we talk about biodiversity questions, proper economic relationships that should obtain in the mezcal industry, the model of Real Minero is an interesting discussion as well. So when we get to that third expression, I'll say just a few words. I don't have much time, but I'll say a few words about Graciela Angeles and her brother Edgar and how they are representing kind of an interesting, and I think, I'll just say, I think a generous approach to making mezcal, and with considerations of its health, its well-being into the future. So with that, let's go ahead and pour the first one. So if you've got a bottle of Rancho Tepúa, if you purchase it from the Congress Bottle Shop, go ahead and pour that out. If you have a bottle at home, obviously pour that out. If you couldn't manage to get a hold of a bottle of Rancho Tepúa, you might have a bottle of mezcal at home. Go ahead and crack that open, because this is the last session. We should celebrate that. We should celebrate actually the togetherness of all of these sessions as we've gone over the last 5 months. So whatever mezcal you got, open it up. And I will say salud to everybody.
Salud.
Roberto, can you get that screen shared?
Yeah.
Great.
Can you guys see the screen?
Looks good.
Yeah, so thank you guys for inviting me. It's an honor, and I think one of the things that I've really enjoyed about my work and what we do at the ranch, and is that through the years we've got to meet really interesting people that I'm very honored to call my friends. And it's been for me, it's been 11 years since I started working full-time at the ranch. That's an actual image of the ranch. It's the closest town to the ranch is the town of Bacanora. It's 15 kilometers away. And for us, I started working with my dad probably more than 20 years ago. And I started developing I started liking working at the ranch. And honestly, when I started as a teen, I never imagined myself just getting more and more involved to the point that it's right now the way I make my living. And honestly, it's not an easy job. It's very demanding, very time consuming. But I think what keeps me going is the love that I have for the ranch and the love that I have for Bacanora and for cattle and for the things that we get to do at the ranch. That's all that makes it worth it. And it is a journey that hopefully I get to, if it's been 100 years after of the Contreras at Rancho Tepúa, hopefully it's gonna be another 100 years, but I was telling, it's not an easy road, and we'll see how that goes. So before we started the production at the ranch was basically, we never thought about planting agave. Honestly, it was all wild agave that what we were using. Actually, the first batches that we did for Cielo Rojo, it was all wild agave. We were not even thinking about planting an agave. But my dad, he changed his way of thinking, and then there was a program in Sonora of reforestation, restoration, and he got involved, and then he got a whole bunch of plants, and then he said, well, I might as well start doing this. And in a period of 10 years, he planted almost 40 hectares of agave at the ranch, around 150 plants of agave. And I think I got some pictures of what the original, of what it was looking before, I guess before 2009. That's one part of what we had at the ranch. And time went by, and I think we were almost harvesting our first cycle of mature agave. That's when in 2011, a big frost in February came and hit Sonora. I don't know if southern Arizona got hit as well. And at first, when we saw the agave, we said, well, nothing happened. But a few weeks later, it was all burned down. And I think we lost about probably more than 70% of those 150,000 plants. And it was almost 10 years of work behind and time. And so my dad talked to me, and he said, Roberto, we're not gonna plant one single agave at the ranch anymore. Like he was devastated. And that frost was not only affected that plantation, it also affected the wild agave population of the ranch. So Rancho Tepúa has always been naturally a place where wild agave grows. Like that's why I told you, we never thought about using or planting agave in a serious way. But I just started doing it because it got to him. But we actually managed the ranch in a good way. The fact that we only use wild agave, so you take the mother plant and you leave the hijuelos. That's the law of the ranch, how we used to do it for wild agave. And as soon as you take the mother, the hijuelos start developing at a faster pace. That's why we never had that problem till the frost. Once the frost hit, the bigger plants died, but also some of the smaller ones. But we also saw palo blancos. We also saw nopal. A whole bunch of native plants got affected. And I remember we were already in the States, like with Cielo Rojo. So the problem for us became, well, we're already in the States and we don't have agave. Like, what are we going to do? So that's when we decided to start looking for other options. And then my dad was like, I don't want to deal with agave anymore. And that's when we started sourcing for agave. And the good thing is that we, at the time, maybe not in the States, and with Cielo Rojo was starting to get a little, first years of Cielo Rojo was starting to do good, like I guess in Arizona and a few other states like California and New York. But our name in the state of Sonora as Bacanora producers in Hermosillo and in some parts of Mexico, because we started we started Destiladora de Tepúa, and for around 4 or 5 years, I used to go to different expos or fairs around Mexico, and we used to sell our Bacanora, but also share with people what we did and explain to people about Bacanora, because they had no idea. Like outside of Sonora, people have heard about, a little bit of people have heard about Bacanora, but most of them have never tried Bacanora. So that's how it all started. I had a little bit of distribution in Guadalajara, in Mexico City, and a few other spots. So by the time Cielo Rojo hit, the first batches were made with Agave Pacifica, wild Agave Pacifica from the ranch. Then we started looking for sources. Thankfully, my dad knew someone in south of Sonora, in Alamos, that had one of the biggest, and probably one of the first, like real nice agave plantations in the state of Sonora, from Alamos. His name is Gerardo Loya. He had a little bit more than 10 hectares of agave, and the quality of the agave he was selling to us was like top notch, like really big piñas. And I think, but his idea was like, I just have 10 hectares, or 10 to 15 hectares, I'm not gonna plant anymore. So we started working with Gerardo, and we started sourcing his agave, and we started working with him for around 4-5 years. And it was us, it also was Rafael Encinas from Batu, and it was Jorge Fimbres from Suaki. It was 3 producers that were buying from Gerardo, I remember. But eventually, I think things with Cielo Rojo started getting more and more, I guess more people started noticing Bacanora, and suddenly we started seeing new Bacanora brands in Sonora, and suddenly people were coming to Gerardo and asking for his agave that he had for us. So then Gerardo was keep on raising the price, and that's how we ended up looking for other sources. But we also thought, well, if we were gonna do this in the right way, we might as well start planting agave again. And we did, but honestly, it's what we had at the ranch is I don't know. I don't know if in the past more than 10 years we've been experiencing more frost than ever before. So we started planting like in places that we thought were good, and then frost. I think we did 3 years in a row, and frosts were killing our agave plantation 3 years in a row. And then, so you start getting discouraged, you start thinking, why, what's the point of doing this? The work, the time, the effort. But I know, honestly, I know that it's like, it's been like education, honestly. It's an education process for us, because I noticed also that the places that we were planting that agave is flat. We chose flat pieces of land. And what I did last year is, well, I'm not gonna plant hectares like I've been doing the past 3 years. I'm gonna plant different spots of the ranch and see which parts of the range this agave is going to be healthy, even though it gets hit by frost, because we got hit by frost last year again. And I noticed that the agave that I planted on mountains was not affected by frost. So this year, what I'm going to continue doing is planting a whole, I'm gonna put an effort like the past years and start really planting agave on the hills. So we were thinking about flatlands. Why? Because we were thinking that it was gonna be easier to water that agave, to throw lines of irrigation, but we're thinking, if we do it on the mountains, how can we irrigate those plants? It's gonna be very hard. It's probably not gonna be possible. If we're doing it in flatland, we can irrigate, we can give another type of help to those plants. But we're thinking about ways that if we're gonna do it on the hills and in the mountains, we're thinking of ways that we can irrigate. We're thinking of ways we can do to help those plants survive frost or plagues or stuff like that. So that's where we're at right now with agave plantations in Rancho Tepúa. I don't know if you guys got any questions.
I should say, I should have said this at the top. I mean, if you have any questions or comments, please go ahead and put them in the chat, and I'll get to them as well as I can.
I guess, Roberto, I'm curious about the the plants that you're planting out on the property. Are you collecting seeds and growing them out? Do you have a vivero on site, or maybe this is that?
Yeah, I'm just gonna show you a picture of it's a very rustic vivero, and at that time I already had taken a whole bunch of them. But we've been collecting seeds for the past 4 or 5 years, and I have a place where I'm growing those seeds to a certain size, and then I'm putting them like it's shown in that picture. Once they're like, I don't know, almost 30 centimeters in tall, that's when I take them to the land. That's been the process for us. I think what we've been doing wrong, and after 3 years I noticed that is that we've been doing flatlands, and honestly it's logic, because the wild agave population from the ranch, it's not on the flats, it's on the hills. So it's pretty evident for us right now that what we were doing wrong. But it has been a learning experience when it comes to agave and what we're doing with agave. We haven't had no one show us a way. It's been trial and error. It's not with, for example, with Bacanora, we had the knowledge that's been passed to us. So it's easy, it has been easier for us to just do what we've been doing and learn new stuff and adjust. But when it comes to agave, there's no knowledge at all in the Sonora mountain range. I was telling Doug, there's an agave availability problem in Sonora that it's getting worse and worse every year. Why? Because there's more and more people trying to make Bacanora, but most of these guys are not thinking or starting with agave plantations. So the pressure is coming into the actual agave that Sonora has right now. I think one of the main problems Sonora has is there's no agave like technicians, or there's just a few, and that knowledge hasn't come to the Bacanora producers of the Sonora mountain range yet, or to the young, or to the people that have lands and stuff like that. So that's one of the problems we're experiencing right now.
So just to add a little bit to, the areas that are vulnerable to frost and those that aren't, I mean, when you say the flatlands, you mean the lowlands too, right? The lands that are lower elevation. So, the cold settles into those pockets, right, of flat land, and they're cold.
Yeah. So I'm saying flatlands, but it's actually 800 meters above sea level. It's just that it's flat. It's completely flat. So I guess the cold just stays there for the whole night, and that's where our agave is being affected.
So it's a little counterintuitive, but it's actually the higher elevations that are better, right, when it comes to frost. And we've talked about maybe southern exposure at higher elevation, which will warm the soil, warm the plants, and maybe protect them, hold the heat a little bit, protect them against the frost. So yeah, it's at higher elevation and southern exposure that I think we've discussed as being maybe the best places to plant agave.
What we're seeing is that when it gets like those really cold days at the ranch, like cattle don't hang on like low places, they'll go up into the mountains.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's just logic or like we like misunderstand that in thinking that if you're high, it's gonna be cooler than if you're low. I don't know why. It's always we always thought that way.
We should listen to the cows.
Yeah.
We have a lot to learn from cattle, among other species.
Yeah, and cattle right now in Sonora with the drought we're having, I don't know if you're seeing, but there's dead cows right now. I'm seeing a lot of pictures of dead cows in a lot of the ranches of Sonora. And by then I was talking and we're saying, well, this is just starting. Like we still got probably 2 more months, and it's gonna be like the more intense, like hottest days are still coming. So like right now for us is if we have to be at the ranch, My dad's there right now. Usually over there. I actually just I was almost 20 days at the ranch. It's after those 20 days is the first week that I've been in Hermosillo. But I'm heading there probably on Friday because we're gonna be distilling. So we're distilling right now and making Bacanora, and then we are taking care of our cattle, giving them feed and giving them water. My dad and I talk a lot about the future, and I think water is gonna be like a big concern in coming years. So we're gonna have to see how we can be more efficient with water. Not only if we want to continue being cattle ranchers, but also if we want to continue being Bacanora producers.
Yeah. So when it comes to cultivation, it seems that the sort of the easiest option, perhaps, is the way I'll put it, is areas on the coast and in the south, or at least in the western part of the state, right? And in the south, which are a little bit less vulnerable to the frosts. And so, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Roberto, but it seems to me like that's where plantations tend to be, and where a lot of agave gets sourced among Bacanora producers that are in the Sierra, like in the eastern and further north parts of the state.
Yes, right now well, since 1992, the Bacanora became legal again. People started harvesting a lot more agave than before, and this has been going for a long time. But because they don't do like selection of the big mature agave plant, a lot of people. I've seen people like see trucks and stuff with agaves that are the size of grapefruit. So honestly, it's becoming a problem. It's becoming a problem, and with Bacanora becoming more popular now than ever, this problem is gonna become a true concern for everyone. Like if the Bacanora industry wants to keep afloat, it's gonna be like obligatory to start planting agave. So what we're seeing right now is that people from south, a lot of the agave that is being used right now is coming from the south, and I guess that's why, because frosts are not getting over there as hard as we're getting the Sonora mountain range. Right. And that doesn't mean that that doesn't mean that the Sonora mountain range is a bad place for agave. And because there's people that are trying to make it that way in a form of saying that we should expand the denomination of Bacanora. It's just that we don't know how to plant agave. And once we get that knowledge, I guess it's all gonna change, you know. It's just a matter of us doing, it's gonna be a big job, but we're thinking of doing something to educate people about agave plantations and the errors that we made as rookies to show to people for them not to make those same mistakes. And it is the same with Bacanora, for example. We've been doing Bacanora for a long time, you know, and a lot of our effort has been about educating people regarding Bacanora. Because the same, I remember, I don't know, and even right now, especially in Hermosillo, with people that I tell them if they want a Bacanora, the first impression they get is, no, I don't. But as soon as they try it and assume that you get to explain people how it's done, they change their mind immediately. So that's been our labor, that's been part of our journey as Bacanora producers, to educate people about Bacanora. I guess now it's gonna be also to get more knowledge about agave in general, and to share that knowledge with more and more people.
We got a couple of questions here. Todd is asking, in a context of drought, can you speak a little bit to how much water actually is required to irrigate agave, to get it started, get it established?
What we were doing before with our agave plantation, before the frost, is, and we actually got to like a really good place, is the first 2 or 3 years before it was set on the field, we used to give, like, we called them riegos de auxilio. Like, it wasn't like we're gonna water this agave every day. But when we saw that it was very, like, the driest months of the year, we used to give, like, I don't know, we used to water like every week or every 15 days, depending on how we saw that agave. What we know now also is that it's good to water or irrigate before, if we're seeing like the weather channel, if we know a frost is coming or very cold days, to give, like, irrigate before that frost comes. So that's, but honestly, not a lot of water. And it's something that we're going to, it's actually something that why agave as an option for a plantation is very, very interesting, and why people are going to start, if the drought continues, I honestly think there's going to be a change in what Sonora as a tradition cultivates into something like agave, because it's just something that doesn't take much water. So we've thought about agave. Also in the ranch, we thought about agave, like right now, even with our story and what's happened, we thought about agave as an option. But right now that we're buying feed for cattle, that's base is corn, and we're giving the feed, and cattle is eating it, and they get thirsty, and they drink more water. And I tell my dad, what's the point, you know, if it's like, it's expensive, cattle would eat more and drink more water. And then so I started doing research, and then I started seeing in Zacatecas that I think they've been hit with drought pretty bad. These guys are giving nopal to their cattle. So it's just a matter of looking for another options, especially if water is going to be a main concern. We're going to have to change the way we do cattle ranching, and we're going to have to change the way we do Bacanora and a whole bunch of activities in the Sonora Mountain Range.
And then Ben is wondering where state programs, support programs might fit into the cultivation of agave in Sonora, who's getting supported, if anyone. And, is there any contribution to the knowledge of planting agave that's coming from state sources? And also, what NGOs might be working in this area, like the Colectivo Sonora Silvestre, which has done quite a bit of work with some Bacanora producers to plant out agave, make greenhouses, semilleros, and viveros and those things. But I'm not sure they're working in your neck of the woods. I'm not sure they're working in the Rio Sonora. So some comments as to those questions.
No, I haven't, like in the Rio de Sonora, I haven't seen like one rancher that's planting agave. I don't know. I've never seen one. Rather than us, I've never seen one. And I guess the efforts of Colectivo and their ideas are pretty good, but we might have to see ways of like what they're doing to multiply it for, I don't know, a lot more. Obviously what they're doing is very good, but I think we really need to make a bigger impact to their to what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I would regard the Rio Sonora as a very important valley for Bacanora history and culture. So I think more attention paid to that valley would be a good thing.
Well, Rio de Sonora, the Sierra Alta, and also the part where the actual Bacanora, the town of Bacanora is, all that is the places that historically they've been producing Bacanora for the longest time, but there's no agave culture, and that's the main problem. We got the knowledge in Bacanora, in the tradition and the culture, but we don't have an agave culture, and that's our main concern. And about government programs, no, there's no programs right now. If anything, we're seeing programs that were destined for farmers or cattle ranchers. They're being like cut down. Like there's no budget. There used to be a few programs like the one where my dad got into, I don't know, it was early 2000s when he got some agave and he got to start that way. But right now, no, it's not happening.
So before Roberto continues, or we continue the discussion, we probably ought to move to the second expression that we're tasting tonight to make sure we get all three in. And I don't know who has the opportunity at this point to be tasting this next mezcal, but it is Respiral's Esperin Pechuga de Café, which is produced by Aureliano Hernandez in San Baltasar Guilavilla. And I just have one comment about this particular mezcal, or maybe two. One, it's an Espadin. So this is made from Agave angustifolia, the same species, essentially, that makes Bacanora. And the second is that, we talk about mezcal and mezcal culture as really being all about tradition and campesino land use practices, rural traditions, and all those things. And we can, I think, run the risk sometimes of kind of fetishizing that tradition and not acknowledging that mezcal producers are as innovative as anyone and are experimenting all the time. And this is an example of that. It's a very traditional producer from a very traditional mezcal producing town. But Pechuga de Café, which means, well, it means chicken breast of coffee, which is probably a strange thing for people to get their heads around. But Pechugas are, in general, they're typically 3 distillations, right? So you do your 2 distillations of a mezcal, which is normal practice and also legal practice in most parts of the Mezcal denomination of origin, maybe all parts of the Mezcal denomination of origin. And then there's a third distillation which incorporates into the still a recipe of fruits, and it can be spices, it can be nuts, it can be herbs, whatever the family recipe for that is. And so you get that, it's not really an infusion, but it's a distillation that incorporates those essences of those different plants into that final product of mezcal. And typically it's called pechuga, which means chicken or turkey breast, because it's often the case that in the top chamber of the still there will be hung a chicken breast, which doesn't necessarily impart chicken flavors to the mezcal, but it's sort of a way to balance out, I think, those spicy and fruity notes that are coming out of the mezcal. And Francisco, who has had plenty of experience in Oaxaca, where pechuga really is the center of gravity, or whether Oaxaca is the center of gravity of pechuga, if you want to add any comments to that, feel free. That's essentially what a pechuga is. This is a coffee pechuga, which was suggested by Alex White himself, who is kind of coordinating the Resverol project. He thought it might be an interesting idea to put coffee in the second distillation of an espadín. And his, one of the producers that is part of the project, Aureliano, was intrigued by that, decided to go ahead and experiment with that. Their first version of it was too strong because they used coffee that was roasted too much. It was like French roast coffee or something in the still. The second batch, which is this one, uses a much lighter roast. And for me, as a sort of a coffee vendor as well as a mezcal person, it's really interesting to mix the two together. And I think you do get coffee flavors in there, but they're subtle enough not to kind of overpower the overall profile of the mezcal. So I just wanted to make the point that this is an innovation, but it's coming from a lot of traditional roots. So let's go ahead and pour that one, those who have it. And Roberto, sorry to interrupt you, but this is kind of the way these weird tastings go. and please continue.
Yeah, and so we're seeing what the future is, or what's going on in the Bacanora world right now, and there's a lot of interest, like a lot of pressure for expansion of the actual denomination of origin. So our denomination of origin was formed originally, it's 35 towns, also known as mountain range. But the reason those small towns were selected was because they had history with Bacanora. They also had wild agave, and that's in a way the government in the I guess it was 2000 when the denomination of origin was established, but in the 90s thought of the project Bacanora as a project made to inject life and development to those small towns. Like we're talking small towns where it's only farming and cattle ranching, and there's not a lot of work options for young people. And that's one of the main reasons that we're seeing right now. And I'm only talking about my personal experience in Aconchi, where my ranch is. There was a point where there was 10 ranching families that used to drive through a ranch. Right now, there's only 3 families left, and most of the ranches are being sold or rented. So this is only where we're at, because I know it's becoming a bigger problem throughout the whole state. Young people don't want to do Bacanora. They're not interested in cattle ranching. They don't want to do farming. It's a big problem. I'm not even talking about, well, it's young people, but for us as in the ranch, I remember my dad having ranch help for that lasted at the ranch 20 years working with my dad. The same with my grandpa. Like guys that when I was young, they were almost like my uncle. And I guess from 10 years ago, it's been probably from 40 to 50 different people working at the ranch. And people ask me, why, Roberto, why do you work that way? Like, why are you doing that kind of work? Like, I've learned with time to enjoy the hard work at the ranch. Like it's, I've learned to like, since I was a young age, the only thing I wanted to do was be at the ranch. And with time, I've learned to enjoy the hard work. But it's taxing on the body. For example, I see my dad right now, he's early 60s and has bad shoulders, he has a bad back and so hard, like it's, and the guy that's helping us right now, he's in his 50s, he's got both broken wrists at one point, a broken leg. So what we do is hard work and it's a lot of time. So I understand perfectly like young guys why they don't want to do what we do, honestly. It's also a concern for us. It's a problem for us as well. But also when it comes to what's coming, that's one of the problems also that we're facing. But right now, there's with mezcal popularity and Bacanora popularity increasing. There's a lot of people with resources in the biggest cities of the state of Sonora that are starting to plant agave. They're starting to plant huge extensions of agave. And at first we were like, well, they're and pushing for the expansion of the denomination of origin. So I guess it was 2 years ago that us as producers got together and we went with the presidents of each town in the denomination of origin and talked to them. And we set a big meeting and we kind of stopped them from that big pressure. They were like, we kind of stopped their, what they wanted to do, but it is still ongoing and they got land, they got resources, and they're pushing for places like Obregón, Navajo, Guaymas, Hermosillo, which are the bigger cities, to start planting agave and start producing Bacanora. Now I tell having producing a good agave spirit is one thing. It's not going to be easy for them. They don't have the knowledge. They might learn how to do it. But an agave spirit is not only a quality spirit, it's probably half a product. What helps us as a producer is the ranch, is our story, is our heritage. Even if they try to do what we do in those cities, they are missing like half of what sells a quality agave spirit or a mezcal. So that's what is going on right now. And at first we were against it, what's going on. But right now, if you think about it, if they start planting agave, I don't think we're against it. If they want to plant agave, they let them plant agave. We're not against it. When you think about it, it'll be a way to the problem with agave availability. That's a way to solve that problem. But in our ideal world, it would be cool if they plant agave and then they come to the small towns of the denomination of origin. That's where they make their distilleries, because they'll bring resources and life to those small towns. That would be like the ideal scenario. But we're thinking that if they get to make the government expand only for agave, they're gonna go for the whole thing. That's why it's a little bit concerning what's going on. But so that's what's going on right now.
So just so I'm clear, one scenario is that people who are not currently in the denomination of origin could produce agave outside the DO and then locate or support, capitalize distilleries within the DO, and therefore invest in those communities
And create jobs.
and create jobs. That's one scenario. Okay.
If it's gonna happen, that would be the way that I think a lot of the producers are against it. But if you put it that way, I think that could be a way that it could work, you know. But we'll see. We'll see.
So alternatively, I mean, for me, the best case scenario is to develop a culture of agave cultivation in the DO itself. Because agave has other benefits, right? It's not just about distillation. It's not just about making mezcal. It's about erosion of the land. It's about ecosystems that benefit from agave. It's about maybe other products you could derive from agave, like syrups or food or I can imagine we are all, I think, in the process of imagining agave as this multifunctional plant that can provide, different avenues for livelihood, right? So is there a way, do you think, that we could establish a process of agave culture? Because you say they're lacking that in the Sierra, right? Establish it and just awaken people to, the benefits, the possibilities that might derive from it.
Yeah, remember 2 years ago that we made that, we called those guys, we called probably 10 different producers of the Rio de Sonora Valley, and all of them came. Like if we we tell them what we're trying to do, I'm pretty sure they're gonna come.
Well, they came. Sure. I mean, they were interested.
Yeah, and they came because it was Bacanora, right? But if you tell them we're trying to do like an educational program of agave plantations or agave cultivation, I assure you, a lot of people will be interested. And we can actually set like workshops, and we can start thinking about some ideas, and we can do like a pilot program in the Rio de Sonora and see how it goes. And if it goes good, we can implement that same in the Sierra Alta or even in Bacanora. It's just a matter of fact of getting it done.
Yeah, a lot of people are also, using agave as livestock feed. So there are many uses for agave, including in the ranching paradigm, right? I think.
Oh yeah, but for example, what I'm trying to do is, for example, at the ranch is trying to see how I can use the waste that I have that we're producing at the Binata, and probably do composting. I thought about using like the binasas to make adobe bricks. There's a whole bunch of options, to make. But it's funny because right now that it's feed is in the Sonora Mountain Range is very scarce. As soon as we pull the agave out of the oven, our cattle, it's a constant fight with our cattle for the agave. So even as agave feed, like I told my dad, if we had a whole bunch of agave at the ranch, I was sure you will be cooking agave and giving them half of it instead of buying it from a bed in Hermosillo.
Right. And second, what occurs in this, a question for you is what prompted you guys to start to produce some other things like Palmilla and Lechuguilla, which is not strictly speaking, or not at all, Bacanora. Did that have to do with the adaptability of other species of agave to the changing climatic conditions. So told too, which it might be more resistant to freezes. I mean, so the diversification that you guys have experienced and pushed recently, I mean, what prompted that?
Yeah, so last year with COVID and pandemic, we ended up letting our branch help. We didn't have help at the Binata, and we continued production, but we made only small batch. Like what we produced last year was only small batch because it was made between my dad and me. So we were doing from 100 to 150 liter batch, and we usually our batches are around 400, 450 liters. So we thought, well, if we're doing small batches, like half an horno, we can do half an horno of palmilla and see what comes out. We can do half an horno of lechuguilla and see what comes out. And honestly, we didn't have like high expectations of it. We're just like experimenting. We started with palmilla, and we have a higher elevation part of the ranch that has wild palmilla. So we started harvesting, and then we ended up doing the whole process. And we actually did the process as it was Agave Pacifica. It was the same process. And by the time we distill and we make the final blends and we tasted, we were really blown away with the final product. And we said, well, for being our first batch of Sonora, so this is pretty good. So we ended up doing 2 more. And then we thought, well, if we did palmilla and it turned out really good, we might as well do a lechuguilla one. So it wasn't our first time doing lechuguilla. We previously have done an ensamble or ensambles with half Agave Pacifica and half Agave Shubii. But the final result, we didn't really like it. I'm talking about 10 plus years ago. We didn't like the final product. So logic was, why would I do a whole batch of lechuguilla if half is not very good? But this time we did only lechuguilla, and honestly, it's happened the same with palmilla. Honestly, we really like what came out. So then we did another batch of lechuguilla, and that's how we got to do those 2 new products. And part of the idea of the Reserva del Vinaterio, this series, is to explore beyond the denomination of origin of Bacanora and stuff that is being sometimes sold as Bacanora to someone that has no knowledge. Like, because if you go to, for example, Webpack, some people will sell you palmilla and they will tell you it's Bacanora, and a lot of people don't know, and that's how it's done. So
that's actually happened before.
Yeah. So our idea was for people to show people that Sonora is more than just Agave Pacifica and Bacanora. There's another options. What's helpful for us as well is that it takes pressure away for our only Bacanora production. Instead of me being, I need to harvest all this Agave Pacifica right now, it's I can divide that into 3 different products. Now my idea is not with these 2 new products. I'm not thinking about doing thousands of liters. It's not the idea. I'm just gonna produce a few batches a year. Like, I'm not gonna go and harvest away. It's not gonna be like that. And it's still going to be small batches, and it's not gonna be like what we do in Bacanora, that we work a little bit more intensive, in a more intensive way.
So let me interrupt one more time and move to the 3rd expression tonight, which is Real Mineros Espadín. distilled in clay pots, which is the way of things in that town, which is Santa Catarina, Minas, south of Oaxaca City. We chose this one partly because their project is definitely conscious of some of the questions and the issues that we've been discussing tonight and during other moments of the series. There is a film called Agave, the Spirit of a Nation, which I would highly recommend that you see. And Graciela and her brother Edgar Angeles are featured in that film, along with some other really sort of legends in the agave spirits world, like Carlos Camarena in tequila country, as well as Aquilino Garcia from a little bit further south and east and maybe just further south in Oaxaca, was one of, well, the founding sort of producer for Mezcal Vago. It's a great film. You can enjoy their perspectives on some of the things that we've been talking about tonight. In Graciela's case, she's worried, as well as many other people, that the mezcal boom, so-called, or the expansion of the mezcal market will result in the overharvesting of many agaves. She calls this the biological and cultural patrimony of her community, of Oaxaca, maybe Mexico in general. And so they have certainly done a great deal to cultivate agaves, to take a special care of certain endemic varieties of certain species in their part of the world. And also she's a real sort of, according to the film, really dedicated to her community. So part of the proceeds that she's realized from Real Minero have been invested in a community library in Minas. And so she's a real community actor, very sharp and cognizant of both the past and the future of agave. In fact, in her words, the past is the present, is the future. And so she represents the spirit of some of the things we've been talking about tonight. So if you have a bottle of Real Minero, go ahead and pour it now. And I'm sorry that we haven't a lot of time to talk about the mezcals themselves in this tastings. What's happened is that the presentations during the tastings have been almost or as educational as the presentations on the nights before. Right, so the tasting part of this thing is kind of taken a little bit of a backseat to the information sharing that has been going on here, which I think actually is fine. You can always reach out to me if you have questions about the mezcals themselves. So anyway, with that, Roberto, let's keep. I have one more question in regard to what we were just talking about, and that's that. So the lechuguilla that you guys make is 100% Shrevii, right? Agave Shrevii.
Yes.
And that seems, is that a little more resistant than Agave Gustifolia to the inclemencies in the weather that you guys experience?
Yeah, so the part of the ranch is higher in elevation. There's palmilla and there's lechuguilla. And I have, so we harvested lechuguilla at the ranch, but I only have like a small area that's high elevation at the ranch. So it was not enough because we didn't go harvesting everything I could find. So I talked to one of my neighbors we have a pretty good relationship with him. He really likes Bacanora. And I told him, why don't you harvest some lechuguilla for us and we'll give you a part of the final product of the distillate. And he said, let's go. And he just went to his ranch and started, he started bringing lechuguilla to us, but his ranch is high elevation country and there's a lot more lechuguilla over there. And it is more frost resistant than Pacifica. But honestly, I don't know if it's just a thing right now where our ranch in our region is being every year, like if it's cooler and cooler and drier, because I can remember 10 years ago that I can remember us experiencing frost is like it's becoming like the normal at the ranch to have frost. Like
Right.
I believe the Rio de Sonora is becoming cooler and cooler and a little bit drier and drier every year.
And you know, another species which might be the most used or most important species when it comes to northern Sonora and Lechuguillas is Agave palmeri, which is really important for wildlife corridors, in particular lesser long-nosed bat migrations. And you know, Borderlands Restoration Network, on the board of which we both sit, right? That's the major agave they're working with, both in southern Arizona and Sonora. So, what do you have any comment on, like the future of that particular species or that variety when it comes to mezcal production in the
Yes,
region?
I've done a few batches of palmeri, so I know what's I know the quality of the mezcal you can produce with palmeri. So it would be a good option. So if it's if the future is that we're gonna be colder and colder every year, we might actually think of, instead of planting Agave Pacifica, planting another type of varieties that are cool, more cold resistant. And palmeri is a good option. Trebia is a good option as well. And Palmilla is a good option. So like I told you, we're every year we're facing like even production has been, it's a challenge because every year you're facing new like different weather. So fermentation reacts different. Fermentation can be 5-6 days, but it can turn to 14. Like the past batch that we just distilled was 16 days, and usually during the month of May, it's like at most it'll be 8 days. But we're having cooler nights, right? Right now at the ranch, Hermosillo it's an open. It's always been an open. But the Sonora Mountain Range, at least where we're at, it's cooler, very cool at nights. Like it gets chilly at night still. That's why instead of 8 days that'll be like usual, we got 16 days so we got to distill. So we got those longer fermentations. And I think someone told me that they were having less yields compared to other years. And we usually like producing Bacanora in February till June or July because these are the driest and hottest months. And we avoid production in winter production because it's longer fermentation and less yield. So the work is the same, but you get almost half of the product is not there. And right now it's the month of May and we're kind of getting that. Us that we distilled last week, it wasn't that bad, but there is a decrease in what we usually would get off yield for Agave Pacifica and Palmilla compared to last year.
Yeah, so I would imagine that might be a combination of the cool nights as well as the drought. I mean, maybe there might be, I don't know, the yeast populations might be different because of, you know, the state of the vegetation around. But I also wonder whether those longer fermentations are resulting in different flavors in the final product, or
yeah, there was something like we distilled Palmilla and we distilled Pacifica last week, and it's different from the products that I got last year during summer. There's a variation, but I tell people it's when it comes to agave spirits and now with Sotol, for example, we finish a batch, it takes around 15 days. But with fermentation, it's a lot longer, more than 20 days for a whole batch to be ready. And when we finally distill, we make some blends and then we put everything on 20-liter glass jets, and it goes into our storage. But we try it, and what's cool about it is a month goes by and that flavors will change. 2 months go by and they'll continue changing. And I don't know if it's the same with other spirits in general, but agave spirits and now that's Lyrian is doing the same thing. They keep evolving with time, and usually they keep evolving in a good way. Like there's a word that we use. We say it's se asienta. They kind of settle. They can be very aggressive as soon as you just distill them and make those blends, but with time they just settle. They are, I don't know how to explain it, but it's very weird. It's very strange to taste something as soon as it's been distilled, and then you come back to it a few months later and it will be something else.
Right. Speaking of which, Real Minero often rests their product in glass for a while before they bottle and commercialize, and it's that same kind of settling to settle it.
Yep.
And I've done a lot of tastings where I've tried to explain why people do that, and it's not so easy to explain why they do that. But,
and it's the same in Sonora with the tradition. There's a tradition in Sonora, and I think the same in Oaxaca and other mezcal producing states, where they grab those glass jugs and they just put them on dirt, and they dig a hole and put that glass jug in dirt, and then they say, when my daughter turns 15, I'm gonna take that off there to try it for the quinceañera, right? Yeah, stuff like that goes on, and it's been done for the longest time, you know.
Mm. Well, let's see. Any other questions? I'm trying to look at the chat here, and oh well, in answer to Charlie's question, when you know that stuff's available now. So Palmilla and Lechuguilla are already in Arizona, Charlie.
Yeah, I'm actually drinking lechuguilla right now. So my father, he's a special character, but he likes his Bacanora. He drinks Bacanora from the moment he gets up in the morning. On an empty stomach, he'll have a cup of Bacanora. It's a tradition as well. We call it hacer la mañana, to make the morning. And I used to see him and I asked him, why do you do that? Like, why do you do that? And he tells me it gives me energy for the day. Like, it gets things on my body going. And it also gets me hungry, so breakfast tastes better. And that's the thing with agave spirits, and I understand why they have become popular. The work we do on the field, on ranches and stuff, it is hard work. And at the end of the day, having a cup of Bacanora makes everything worthwhile, especially if you are the one who did the whole thing. It makes it easier, makes everything better for us.
I've actually seen your father get up at 4:30 in the morning, and the first thing he does.
Yeah, he doesn't sleep. That's another thing. He doesn't sleep. He's an elf. And he could hear like the slightest sound at night, and he'll like be up. But it's part of like my journey in Bacanora, and a good thing about it, and I get to hang out with my dad, and I got 20 years I got to see him some do some really cool things on a horse and even on harvest and stuff. Right now for him, he has another role at the ranch, and it's hard for him to accept. And so life has been hitting him literally pretty hard the past 2 years. But his role at our company is very important because his passion for Bacanora and the ranch, that's what he's taught me, and that's the reason I'm doing what I'm doing. Hopefully the same can happen when I don't have kids yet, but hopefully the same happens in the future with our company.
Well, yeah, this thing is really real. And my personal preference would be to see sort of Bacanora culture from start to finish developed in the places where Bacanora has been made for so many generations. So let's continue to work on that in your valley as well as others in the Sierra.
Yeah, I think we need to set an example. We like for others. It's the same with Bacanora. What we did with Bacanora with Cielo Rojo, because most people didn't know or heard about Bacanora but didn't try it. So Cielo Rojo opened that door for many people of trying a good quality Bacanora. It's the same. We're gonna have to set an example, and for others, a good example, and for those to finally follow, and for this to continue.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a fine note to conclude this session. I don't know, Ben, if you want to say a couple of last words as the primary coordinator of the set of all of these sessions.
I mean, I guess I have a question for Roberto. You know, through this series, we've identified a lot of the challenges, and many have been identified here tonight. The changing climate, the changing in markets, the overexploitation. What are some of the elements that give you hope and make you excited to continue this? And that you see building, right? Learning from the mistakes, or learning from the great models out there, from the tradition you've spoken about your family.
Well, what gives me hope is that people are very interested in what we do, like in agave spirits in general. It's a category that keeps growing and gets more interest. So people are interested in what we do at the ranch. Like, people want to know what we do, how we do it, where we do it, with what we do it. And I believe this, for example, I know a producer from Mariacora, Miguel Espinosa. I think Doug knows him. He's got two young kids, and they follow what we do on Instagram and Facebook. And they come to me and start asking me, how do you do this? How do you? And they even tell me, well, if you're gonna do a batch, let me know, and I'll want to go and help you out. And a lot of, so when I get to talk to them, it's a lot of what I talk to them is, because they ask a lot of questions. So I try to answer the most I can. And there's a thing with producers in Sonora where they don't like giving out information. But honestly, I've seen my dad, how he's open to people coming to him, and he explains in detail what we do at the ranch. And at first I used to tell him, why are you telling, for example, Rafael Encinas or Patu, why are you giving all these tips to him and stuff? They told me it doesn't matter, it's not that important. At the end, he's in a different region, he's gonna produce a different spirit. And that's when it hit me, and we are in a community and sharing information. I think being at Bacanora, a new category, we need to start doing that. So that's what brings me hope. That's why at first also with pictures and videos and stuff, I didn't really like taking pictures. of what we did at the ranch, but it's so changed. It's so changed because I think it's important to show people what we do and how we do it. And hopefully people can start doing the good things that they see in my Instagram, in my Facebook, you know. So that's what brings home. But I hope to inspire guys like the sons of Miguel, like other young kids that are in the Sonora Mountain Range, and that they're almost getting to their 20 years in age, and they're like, they don't know what to do. They don't know if they need to leave town and stuff, or they think, well, I must stay with my dad and help him out, or they're at that point. So I hope to inspire people that way, you know, in them staying. And at the end, for example, a vinatero, if their sons don't want to do what he did, like all his knowledge, all his history, all everything that he did, it ends in the moment that his son decides to do something else, to leave town, to do something else. All the knowledge, all his experience just ends right there. So hopefully we can look for ways to inspire and get people to have more second, third, fourth, fifth generations. That would be ideal for me.
Beautiful. Thank you, Roberto. Doug, Todd, Anna, it's been an honor to put this together. 16 plus incredible speakers over 5 months. This is just a point in the road, right? We're all moving forward. Thank you all for joining. This is great stuff.
Hey, Ben, just thank you, Doug. You know, unbelievable. I mean, I'm truly honored and humbled. Roberto, just amazing. Thank you for all you all have done. This was truly exceptional.
And thanks to all of you who attended. You know, of course, the community is made up importantly of all of you. So thanks for your attention over the last 5 months. Really appreciate it.
No, thank you guys for inviting me and to meet. I've heard a lot about Ben and Charlie and a few of the names that I'm from Francisco. A few of the names that I'm seeing, and even if it's like this how we're meeting, it's an honor to be here and honored to talk to you guys, and hopefully we can do this again. And if you're in the area and if you like, I told Doug, because our range has open gates to anyone who wants to come and see what we do for a visit. And if you guys are ever want to try to make that trip, I know with pandemic it's a little bit complicated right now, but hit me up and we can set something, or hit Doug and we can set something up.
You bet. Sounds great.
Salud a todos.
Salud a todos.
Salud.
Nos vemos pronto.
Hi, buenas noches. Thank you, everybody. That was great.
Thanks, Jesus. Thanks.
Gracias.
All of you. Thanks a lot.
Good night.